There is a picture Billy Crystal still remembers. It was taken yesterday. It was 1992. A packed Friars Club roast. The room was filled with comedians, actors, legends, and people who understood one brutal rule of comedy. If you were sitting on that stage, nobody was safe. Billy Crystal was the target that night. He was smiling, trying to survive the jokes, trying to act like the insults were not cutting straight through the room. But behind him sat Robin Williams, completely committed to one of the most ridiculous performances anyone had ever seen. He was not just telling jokes. He had transformed himself into a character so outrageous, so insane, and so fearless that the entire room was falling apart with laughter. And decades later, Billy Crystal still cannot tell that story without laughing. Not because it was just funny, not because it was just another wild Hollywood memory, but because that story holds the Robin Williams the world sometimes forgets. Not the tragedy, not the final headline, not the heartbreaking August day in 2014 when millions woke up and felt like laughter itself had been wounded. Billy remembers the friend, the man who could walk into a room and change its temperature in seconds, the man who could make strangers feel lighter, the man who could destroy an audience with comedy and still make every person feel loved. Before we go deeper into the beautiful, painful truth behind Billy Crystal and Robin Williams' friendship, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories behind the legends, the laughter, the heartbreak, and the moments Hollywood never really forgets. Because at 78, Billy Crystal is still carrying Robin Williams with him. He is not carrying him as a headline. He is not carrying him as a sad ending. He is carrying him as a laugh that still echoes, a memory that still hurts, a friendship that started before the world fully understood what Robin Williams was about to become. And maybe that is why Billy keeps telling these stories, because if the world only remembers how Robin died, then it misses the bigger truth of how he lived. Robin Williams and Billy Crystal first crossed paths in the late 1970s, inside the wild, unpredictable Los Angeles comedy scene. These were not glamorous rooms at first. They were small clubs, late-night stages, smoky corners, and hungry audiences waiting to see who could survive under pressure. Billy was sharp, controlled, and brilliant with timing. Robin was something else entirely. He did not simply perform jokes, he exploded into characters. He moved like a man whose mind was running 10 miles ahead of his body. He could shift voices, faces, accents, and entire personalities faster than most comedians could write a punchline. And when Robin entered a room, people did not just listen. They turned. There was something impossible to ignore about him. He had the energy of a storm, but the heart of someone who knew loneliness better than he wanted to admit. That is what made him so fascinating. On the outside, he seemed unstoppable. Inside, there was always something deeper. Something more fragile, something that made the comedy feel less like showing off and more like survival. Robin Williams was born on July 21, 1951, in Chicago. From the outside, his childhood looked privileged. His father was a senior executive at Ford, and his family eventually lived in a massive home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. He went to private school. He was smart, warm, and funny. People remembered him as the kind of kid who could make others laugh without even trying. But behind the comfort was silence. His parents were often busy, and Robin spent long stretches of childhood alone. He created worlds with toy soldiers, invented characters, built imaginary battles, and filled empty rooms with voices, because sometimes that was the only way to make the loneliness disappear. That detail matters. Because years later, when Robin Williams became famous for creating entire worlds out of thin air, it was not only talent. It was something he had been doing since childhood. He had been building company for himself before the world ever paid to watch it. He learned early that if you could become the noise in the room, maybe nobody would notice how quiet it felt inside. Robin eventually earned a place at Juilliard, one of the most respected acting schools in the world. One of his classmates was Christopher Reeve, who would later become Superman and one of Robin's closest friends. Even there, even among gifted performers, Robin stood out. But formal training could not fully contain him. The stage was calling louder. The live audience, The immediate reaction, the electricity of a room that could change in 1 second, that was where Robin belonged. So he left and threw himself into stand-up. And once he hit the comedy scene, everything moved fast. By the late 1970s, Robin was not just another comic. He was a phenomenon. He won a Grammy for his comedy album Reality, What a Concept. Then came Mork Mindy, and suddenly America had found a performer unlike anyone else on television. As the alien Mork, Robin could be absurd, innocent, chaotic, sweet, strange, and hilarious all at once. Within a single season, he became one of the most recognizable comedians in the country. Fame did not slowly arrive. It crashed into his life. But Billy Crystal, who knew him behind the scenes, saw more than the fame. He saw the friend who could show up unannounced and turn an ordinary night into a story people would repeat for decades. He saw the comedian who could roast you so brutally that you could barely breathe, then hug you like a brother afterward. He saw the man who gave everything to make people laugh, even when it cost him energy nobody else could measure. But Billy also saw the darker side of the era. The comedy world of the late 1970s and early 1980s was dangerous in ways people often romanticize now. Drugs and alcohol were everywhere. The party culture was intense. The pressure was constant. Robin Williams, already one of the most electric people in any room, fell into that world hard. Friends later described how easily substances became part of the scene around him. It was not glamorous. It was not funny. It was a warning sign hiding inside a successful life. Then, in March 1982, everything changed. John Belushi died. Robin had been around those same circles. He knew Belushi. He understood exactly how close that tragedy felt. When someone you know dies from the same world you are living in, the danger stops feeling distant. It becomes a mirror. And for Robin, that mirror was terrifying. With his first child on the way, he made a decision that would change the next 2 decades of his life. He stopped drinking. He stopped using drugs. He got sober. And for 20 years, he stayed that way. That part of the Robin Williams story often gets buried under the tragedy. But it deserves to be remembered. He fought. He chose life. He built structure. He found cycling and threw himself into it with the same intensity he brought to comedy. He once told people close to him that biking was better for him than cocaine, that it helped save his life. And through those years, he created some of the most unforgettable work in modern entertainment. Good Morning, Vietnam showed the world that Robin's improvisational madness could carry real emotional weight. Dead Poets Society revealed a completely different side of him, quiet, controlled, deeply human. In that film, he was not racing through characters. He was standing still, teaching a room full of boys that life was precious and words mattered. Then came Aladdin, where his voice became pure magic. The genie was not just animated. He was Robin's imagination released from gravity. Mrs. Doubtfire made millions laugh, but underneath the costume was a father terrified of losing his children. The Birdcage showed his generosity as a performer, letting others shine while he anchored the heart of the story. And Good Will Hunting finally gave him the Oscar. That Oscar was not for the loudest Robin Williams. It was for the quiet one, the one who could sit on a park bench and speak gently about grief, love, regret, and pain. The one who could tell another wounded soul, "It's not your fault," and make millions believe he was saying it to them too. That was the miracle of Robin Williams. He could be the funniest man in the room, but when he became still, he could break your heart. And through much of that journey, Billy Crystal was there, not as a random Hollywood friend, not as someone who only knew the public version. Billy knew the private rhythm of Robin. He knew the strange calls, the wild jokes, the moments of absurdity, the generosity, the roasts, the comic relief events, the backstage chaos, and the quiet loyalty behind it all. Alongside Whoopi Goldberg, Billy and Robin became part of comic relief, raising huge amounts of money for people experiencing homelessness. They did not just show up once for attention. They kept showing up for years. They used comedy to help people who had nothing to laugh about. That is one of the most important things about Robin Williams. His comedy was never separate from compassion. He did not make people laugh because he wanted to stand above them. He made people laugh because he wanted to reach them. For Robin, humor was not only performance, it was rescue. It was how he entered pain without frightening people. It was how he gave someone a moment of relief when life felt impossible. One of the clearest examples came through his friendship with Christopher Reeve. After Reeve's devastating riding accident in 1995 left him paralyzed, he was facing unimaginable darkness. He was in a hospital bed, trying to understand what his life had become. Then, Robin Williams walked in dressed like a Russian doctor, doing an outrageous accent, creating a ridiculous moment in the middle of unbearable pain. And Christopher Reeve laughed. For the first time since the accident, he laughed. Reeve later said that moment helped him believe life could still be possible. Think about that. Robin did not walk in with a speech. He did not arrive with perfect words. He arrived as only Robin could through comedy. But behind the joke was love. Behind the absurdity was loyalty. Behind the performance was a friend trying to pull another friend back toward life. That is the Robin Billy Crystal keeps trying to protect in public memory. Because when a famous person dies tragically, the world has a cruel habit of flattening them. Their whole life becomes one final moment. Their films, friendships, victories, kindness, struggles, and humanity get compressed into the way it ended. Billy Crystal refuses to let that happen to Robin. He keeps telling the funny stories, because the funny stories are not disrespectful. They are sacred. They are proof that Robin was alive, brilliant, loving, ridiculous, generous, and unforgettable long before the final chapter. But the final chapter did come. And it was more heartbreaking than most people understood at the time. In 2003, after 2 decades of sobriety, Robin relapsed while working in Alaska. He later described feeling alone and afraid, which can be one of the most dangerous emotional states for someone with addiction history. What began as a small slip became something much heavier. He went to rehab in 2006. He continued fighting. He tried to recover control. But years later, something far more terrifying began happening, something that was not just addiction, not just depression, not just stress, and not something Robin himself could fully understand. In late 2013, strange symptoms began appearing. Insomnia, anxiety, physical changes, a tremor in his hand, difficulty sleeping, fear that did not seem connected to anything happening around him. Then came paranoia, confusion, and problems with memory. This was a man whose genius depended on speed, instant words, instant voices, instant reactions. Suddenly, he was struggling to trust his own mind. While filming Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, he reportedly had trouble remembering lines. For an actor, that is difficult. For Robin Williams, it must have been terrifying. Imagine being the man whose brain had always been a fireworks show, and suddenly the lights started going out. His wife, Susan Schneider Williams, later described those months with devastating honesty. She wrote about the illness that was attacking his brain before anyone had the correct name for it. After his death, doctors discovered he had Lewy body dementia, a severe brain disease that can cause confusion, anxiety, movement problems, hallucinations, sleep issues, and changes in thinking. During his life, Robin had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but the full truth was not known until afterward. That is one of the cruelest parts of the story. Robin knew something was wrong. He knew he was changing. He knew his mind was betraying him. But he did not have the full explanation. He did not have the name. He did not have the relief of understanding that this was a disease attacking him, not a personal failure. For a man who had spent his entire life making other people feel safe, he was privately living inside fear that almost nobody could fully see, and still he tried to protect others from it. That may be the most heartbreaking performance of Robin Williams' life. Not a film, not a stage routine, not an award-winning scene. But the final year, when he tried to keep being Robin for everyone else, while something inside him was falling apart. He kept appearing. He kept working. He kept smiling when he could. He kept carrying the weight quietly, because he had spent his whole life being the person who made the room feel better. On August 11, 2014, Robin Williams died at the age of 63. The world stopped. It was one of those celebrity deaths that did not feel distant. People who had never met him cried like they had lost someone personal, because in a way, they had. Robin had been in childhood living rooms, family movie nights, hospital rooms, lonely apartments, classrooms, and late-night reruns. He had made people laugh when they were children, and made them cry when they became adults. He had been the genie, the teacher, the doctor, the father, the friend, the voice of chaos, the voice of comfort.